action, networking, taking it above, bringing value to the conversations that you're having.
As we climb in our journey and we learn, to share that learning with others so that we grow as a community.
Inclusion plays a part in terms of now garnering all those experiences together and creating a cohesive enough team to produce strong performance.
Be visible, comment about it, reach out. Hello everybody. How's everyone doing today? I hope you guys are having a brilliant day because I'm so excited. I have Dean Delpiche with me today as we are starting an amazing conversation. And it's a conversation that must be had. It's a conversation that we need to have. It's a conversation that we will have. So hi, Dean. How's everybody? How are you doing?
Well, I'm fantastic, Meena. Thank you so much for opening up the this discussion. It's fantastic that we're doing this during Empowerment Week, and congratulations to Destination CEO. I mean, 6 years. Wow, that's amazing. Fantastic achievement.
Thank you. I am excited. It's been a lot of hard work, but we're here and we're celebrating together. I can't thank you enough for, taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule and having this conversation and leading this amazing panel. So what do you think? Should we get the panelists on board?
Hey, I'm ready to go. If you are, like, we can start it all up. That's awesome.
Fantastic. Dean, as I bring all the panelists, do you want to quickly talk to the viewers and tell them what it is that we're doing today?
Yeah, 100%. So today, what we would like to do is have a conversation about hearing voices or the voices of the Black community. And, these conversations have been happening over the years, but in the light of, the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the situation with Amy Cooper in Central Park, and many others, obviously there's been an amplification of voices speaking with regards to anti-Black racism, systemic oppression, systemic racism in our workplaces and in different community organizations. And one of the things that we have determined to do is push forward this conversation. And there's been so many different groups, such as, the Black North Initiative or the Black Professionals in Technology, Black Professionals in HR, and so many other groups in Canada that are pushing forward these conversations. And we feel like here at Destination CEO, we should do the same. And the goal of pushing forward the conversation is not just to talk, but it's to really find tangible solutions to really address the issues and give insight and support. So that's what we're doing today.
Awesome. So let's bring the amazing speakers, the amazing panelists. Hello, Serrano. Welcome to Destination CEO's Empowerment Week today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Deborah. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Hi, Erica.
Hello, all.
Welcome to Destination CEO. I am so excited to have you all here.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Thank you. And what an honor to share this panel with my own mentor, my first mentor in Canada from 21 years ago, Erica Taylor. So thank you, Erica, for taking the time and, honoring and gracing this platform for me. Thank you. So without further ado, let's get started. I am going to hand over the mic to Dean to get our panel started.
Yeah, awesome. Meena, thank you so much. And I'm honored to moderate this panel. I do want to just again say, Meena, we want to celebrate with you the fact that it's 6 years of, you doing fantastic work in the community, really helping not just newcomers, but people in the country of Canada, really, to find opportunity where it may not have seemed easy. And so we just want to, honor you, Mina, and honor your staff at Destination CEO. And really want to say thank you for pulling together this group of people to really have this discussion. So, all kudos to you first, Mina. I want to thank our panelists for being with us today. We're so blessed, if I could use that term, to have such a wealth of experience here on this panel. And I'm going to allow each panelist in a moment to really introduce themselves. But I do also want to say to our live audience, whether you're watching us on Facebook or on YouTube or on LinkedIn Live, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions whatsoever during this time, please feel free to write that in the chat. We're going to take some time near the end of the discussion to answer your questions. We really believe your voice is important and want to make sure that it's heard through any questions that you might have. So let's start by introducing our wonderful group of panelists. I'm going to start to my right. Surana Sandy is here. And Surana, you can hear me?
I can hear you, Dean.
Fantastic.
Thank
Love
you.
that. So I'm going to start with Surana. Surana, why don't you take a moment and introduce who you are to everyone, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Mina. Congratulations on the 6th-year anniversary of Destination CEO. Fantastic job. So as Dean said, my name is Surana Sandy, and in my professional capacity, I'm the CEO of Skills for Change. And Skills for Change is a charitable organization working to serve immigrants and refugees. So we serve about between 16 and 20,000 refugees and immigrants per year with a variety of services, employment, settlement, mentoring, entrepreneurship, academic bridging, language training across 6 centers in the Greater Toronto, Hamilton area. I am from the Black community, obviously, and I am an immigrant myself. I came here as a preteen from this tiny little, the most beautiful island in the world called Grenada. And that really helped to shape my interest and passion in working in the settlement sector. And of course, to advocate for racialized peoples in the work that I do. So again, thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Surana. Appreciate that. We also have Erica Taylor, who is the General Manager of the YMCA. Erica, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, all. My name is Erica Taylor, and I'm the General Manager of the YMCA of Greater Toronto. We go across the GTA, but my primary work is always working in at-risk community. So I work in the North Etobicoke community, and my passion started in 1974 when I came here as an immigrant and as my own struggle to fit in. It sort of landed me in this line of work. And for me, it's celebrating successes. The smallest successes bring about changes. So I'm glad to be here. And thank you, Mina. And congratulations to 6 years of Destination CEO.
Awesome. Awesome. We also have Mark Dunn on the panel. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Mark Dunn. I am a self-awareness speaker. I have a background in mental health as well as being a teacher. I've done some business development roles as well in the GTA. And I take this opportunity to say thank you to Mina for this great panel to be a part of. It's a humbling day for me. And at the end of the day, my goal and my intent is to help people become more self-aware about their skill set and what they have to offer in order for them to maximize their potential and bring value to the world in these challenging times.
Amazing. Mark, thank you so much. And last but definitely not least, we have Deborah McKenzie. Deborah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. First, I want to say thank you to Mina. Thank you, Dean, for inviting me to this. And to my panelists, I'm so honored to sit here and be able to discuss this with you as well. So I'm the founder of Diversity Kids, and we're a nonprofit that provides mentorship opportunities, and we participate in community engagement. But our main initiative is really a diverse toy and book drive, which contributes to a good sense of belonging and inclusion for racialized and marginalized Canadians. The reason why we do this is because we're trying to increase the diversity in the toys and the books that we get through donations, and then use those to better match to children in need. So like many organizations, Diversity Kids really is born out of a personal experience. So growing up, sometimes my family, fell on hard times, and we gratefully received items from toy drives during the holidays. But I always knew what came from those toy drives. Imagine me, a mixed race 6-year-old girl who at school is ridiculed for her skin and her hair, but invariably I always received a Barbie doll who was blonde, right? So although not intentional, those gifts were harmful to my identity. And it took a lot of time, and involvement with the Black community to get back and get a sense of who I was. And that's really common practice for traditional toy and book drives. It's allocating based on gender and age rather than interest. So that results in well-intentioned but harmful gifting. And that's why Diversity Kids exists and why I do what I want to do.
Fantastic. Hey, Deborah, thanks so much for that. This is great. So we've got an all-star lineup, I must say. And what I want to do is just number one, especially for those that are joining, just remind you today, the conversation is about hearing voices from the Black community. And we, what we want to do is we really want to highlight, how we can really support, but also create actionable, tangible, ways of really supporting the members of the Black as well as Indigenous people of color communities. So let's kick off with our first question. And I'd love to direct this towards Surana. Many companies right now have expressed their commitment to combating anti-Black racism, inside and outside of their organization. And CEOs have also made commitments to even the Black North initiative that we've heard. So Surana, you're a CEO yourself. So where do you recommend organizations really get started? And because we're talking about not stopping this conversation, how do they actually keep it going?
Okay, thank you, Dean. Just a quick FYI from a technology perspective, I can't hear anybody but you. So if you need me to respond to anyone later on, it'll be a little bit challenging, but I'm not sure if there's something that we can do.
I'll give you a heads up on anything, Surana.
Okay, perfect.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you for that question. So just from some context, we are aware that there are significant challenges in terms of Black people, and whether it's in leadership positions or in various other roles. There was some data that came out even last week about the almost non-existent representation of Black folks on boards, both in private and nonprofit sector and in government-run agencies and institutions. So when organizations who have signed the Black North Initiative, or who have not signed it but have made pledge to make changes in terms of the constitution of the employee base to increase more Black employee representation, I think it starts first with organizations recognizing how they're failing their Black employees before they start signing the initiative and making steps. So it's important that they look at how they integrate Black workers in terms of whether it's very ineffective onboarding, or whether they have non-existent policies around diversity and inclusions, or whether or not they're channeling Black employees into least secure, least positions with opportunity for advancements, which creates challenges for those employees making having growth opportunities in the organization. So to your question as to what organizations can and should do at all levels, first of all, they need to focus on explicitly addressing racial and gender discrimination, or in discrimination against Indigenous peoples, racialized peoples, altogether, rather than jumping in a very performative way around, this is the topic of the day, this is the issue, so we want to say that we really don't agree with anti-Black racism and we're signing a pledge, but there's no concrete policies and procedures that could be measured. And what I mean by that is, with a policy, with particular metrics being built in, and they're tied to accountability measures for managers, you would have particular positive outcomes. So when managers are actually motivated and to be accountable for anti-discrimination policies around hiring, integration, promotion, and support, you would find better outcomes for Black people and a better ability to meet their commitment to the Black North Initiative. it's also important that that is viewed when there's attrition, right? So it's not just when you're hiring people, that when there are companies are going through difficult times, that when they make a decision on whom to lay off, that they don't move forward with just the people they quote unquote uncomfortable with or quote unquote fit, and they reduce the diversity of the organization by removing peoples of color, especially Black people. So really avoiding diversity during layoffs. Another very critical way that these CEOs and their leaders could make a change to bringing in and retaining Black workers is through sponsorship. So there's a lot about mentorship, which is really just giving advice, right? And helping someone. But sponsorship is very concrete because I am putting myself out there to advocate on the behalf of that employee, to create space and opportunities for them, right? And to actively champion them to access more opportunities in the organization. So creating a sponsorship policy, practice, procedure, and a pipeline, I think is critical. And having senior managers commit to that would enable more Black workers, more racialized group people to access further opportunities within the organization to have that profile that is necessary for growth and recognition. Additionally, I attended one initiative and I was struck when a CEO said, well, I'm going to create one spot on my board that is going to be filled by a Black person. I'm like, excuse me? Right? And there's a great term that I read in a McKinsey report where they said, add one and stir approach to bringing in people of color in the workplace. And that's a big challenge. You couldn't just be like, well, no, we've got a Black guy or Black girl. We're done. Good. Yay. And move on. That is unacceptable. It is to really broaden the pool of candidates to ensure that you have a lot more Black people and racialized folks at the table with the opportunity, and don't narrow the access to the opportunity to one. Because what if out of your pool of candidates you have 10 spots and 4 of those spots could be filled by really strong, skilled, capable Black people, but you said we only want one, right? That is an issue. And then lastly, they can stop failing and, improving the diversity of the organization by improving a critical mass hiring of Black people at the high level, at management, director, VP, board level, where they could have impact and influence. They could set policy, strategy. They could be the face of the organization. They're in all functional area, all clusters of a corporation, so that they are representative based on skills and capabilities. So they really have to reconsider how they access Black talent pool, who can bring in diverse experiences and backgrounds and strengths that could really add value to the organization. And, if you don't measure it, it doesn't count. So they really have to set concrete measures throughout the organization, the supervisors, managers, directors, VPs, etc., all accountable in a concrete way for having more racialized folks in their departments, on their teams.
Awesome. Hey, listen, there are so many good nuggets in that. And one point I might want to actually come back to, but before I do that, is there anyone else on the panel that wants to make a comment, based upon kind of some of the words that Sorana was saying? Okay. Well, if our panelists are okay, I do want to ask you a question, Sorana, about one area that I think is it's really, really, really key. And you gave a lot of, great thoughts. Sponsorship. If an organization wants to, start doing that work of sponsorship, right? Maybe you can kind of give us some insight of where can they really, really start? Give us some ground level, advice about, how can I just get a sponsorship program really set up?
So first of all, we need to have at all levels of the organization committed to doing it. And you need to also define why you want to do it and how it's going to be structured within the organization. So for example, if I'm going to be doing it around gender and racial lines or a combination of both, why? What is the gap we're trying to fill? Right? So for example, do we want to have more racialized women at VP level or director level, or if it's, a partner level, depending on the firm, right? what is our current measurement? So is it 15%? Do we want to know by within 3 years, you want to get to 10% more, 15% more, 30% more? So really have some metrics of what you want to accomplish. And then through sponsorship, identify, the pool of high performing candidates who could be developed into stepping into leadership roles. If you don't have those candidates in your organization, make an effort to recruit them, to go where they are, to identify them. Then create a process. Who would be sponsored? Who are the right people to be sponsors? Do they have the level of influence and impact in the organization where if they advocate for and present a candidate, they can push that candidate forward? You really don't want to assign someone to a sponsor who really don't have impact and influence. Then there's just zero value in doing that. So I think it's critical that they are matched with individuals who are able to do that. Secondly, the people who are doing it shouldn't be mandated where, I say, well, you are going to sponsor X, and I really don't want to. So I don't put my best foot forward in doing it. I don't have the cultural competency to have good, proper conversation with and support of the individuals, nor do I have the interest and time. So you have to ensure that the executives, the leads, the directors, the partners that are doing the sponsorships are A, culturally competent, B, passionately interested in doing it, C, have the coaching and skill sets to support that individual to be at their best. I think that's critical for them to be able to do. And then you also want to ensure that if you create a sponsorship opportunity, there will be leadership opportunity for that person, right? So if you start figuring, you match with your sponsor, you've been developed to assume a leadership role, but does the leadership role never materialize? What was the value here?
Right.
What are we doing here? What are you setting up the individual for? What would the risk be to that person in terms of the emotions, the commitments, the way they think you value them? So I think there's a lot that you want to figure out, why, how, what, and whom, and then create space to be able to do it. And then don't mix up. Do not make the mistake of thinking mentoring is sponsorship. Mentorship simply means that you're available to answer a question and provide guidance. But sponsorship is when I am going to go to bat for Dean, so Dean can assume that project, that position, that leadership opportunity, because I understand his competencies and capabilities. You need to be able to select people who will do sponsorship, who are good at assessing people, identifying strengths, helping to guide people to develop those strengths, and be able to market those strengths of those individuals across the organization. That is important. In essence, I am Dean's champion throughout my organization.
Sarana, I love it. We're going to publish an article together on that.
Okay,
I love it. Okay, awesome. Let's move ahead. Mark, I really love the work that you're doing in the area of self-awareness. And it's fantastic to have a speaker like yourself here on the panel. I want to ask you a question about self-awareness, because we know that it's an important conversation, especially when you're a leader. And so do you have any advice for leaders who want to make this a personal priority? And also, how do you think leaders can harness self-awareness to effectively manage diverse teams?
Great question, and thank you for this opportunity. When you look at self-awareness, I always like to just take it from the basics. So I'm going to start with, what is it? Basically, what self-awareness is it identifies your strengths and your positive attributes that you can actually funnel as your champion to become your best self, to maximize your potential. It's helping you be effective and efficient in how you live. So that's self-awareness as a whole. And when you look at self-awareness from a leadership perspective, I had the humble opportunity to do an initiative about a year and a half ago working with Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And I was the manager of my own team that we did a B2B fundraising for the hospital rebuild program. And I had to manage over 25 people. And the one thing that I wanted to come in with from a leadership perspective to help maximize my team's potential that was very multicultural and diverse was the idea of realizing that people need people. If you don't have people, you don't have no leadership. So people need people, number one. People need people who will listen because they care. And people will need people who will listen and who care and will do something about it. Those three components at the onset of myself being a leader, I had to focus on those components of it to build that in, because it allowed for me to gain trust and establish a permission from them to allow me to be a part of them. Because I'm not their boss. I work for my team. My team doesn't work for me.
Right.
So leaders have to come from a gratitude and a humble perspective that is not based on title. It's based on expectation of you as the leader, but to facilitate an environment that can build a safe place. So by what I mean by that is self-awareness and leadership is going to focus on the values and strengths of your people. What are they? So when you're looking at values, you want to have a place of work that feels like home.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a place where people can feel safe and have a space that's safe, they're going to excel. If the place is uncomfortable physically and psychologically, you're not going to get the best out of them.
Mm-hmm.
So some tips and strategies that I came up with that I used are, number one, patience. We all learn differently. We all come from different backgrounds. We all speak differently. At the end of the day, you have to exercise patience to get the best out of people, right? Number two, empathy. Seek to understand people. Don't assume. So let them feel understood. Because when you exercise that empathy, you're going to be able to connect with them on a level that's going to be not really based on work as much as it's going to be based on how's the family doing this weekend. We've
Mm-hmm.
lost the connection of being able to value people regardless of race, gender, creed, of just asking them how are they doing. We've just forgotten that because we're so focused on the bottom line, right? Number three is resources. You want your place of work to be a place of resources to help people if it's personally or professionally. You're not the person as the leader that's going to have all the answers, but you want to be able to facilitate a process that, because you've established trust, that you're going to be able to guide them and support them. Number four is education. You want your place of work to be somewhere where people can grow and flourish. You don't want them to be one-dimensional. So when it comes to seeing the potential in Indigenous people or our Afro-Canadians that we have, you want to be able to also see something that they don't see.
Mm-hmm.
Because they haven't been taught to see that. They've been limited in what they've been able to see. So it's your job as a leader to put them in positions where they can potentially flourish and grow. Number five, trust. You want to establish trust to make people feel comfortable. As I said earlier, trust is a big thing, especially today. People have a hard time trusting depending on their history, depending on their trauma, depending on what they've gone through. So it's going to be hard for you to establish trust if you're coming at them from an employer versus an employee perspective, or from a human being to human being. There's a huge difference there.
Mm-hmm.
And people can smell stuff today. So if you're fronting and faking it, they're going to know.
That's the truth.
Right? So that's number five. And my last component is what I call supportive, creating a supportive unit where people can feel that if they're going through life, they can talk about it. Because sometimes work for some people is their safest place. Because when they leave work, they're probably going into something that they're uncomfortable with, either a community that's not the best. It could be a family dynamics. It could be peer group. You don't know. So when you're able to take these 6 components and put them together as a leader, you're going to really flourish and prosper, both from a business side as well as the individual personally and professionally. And when I also broke down the idea of strengths and skills, what we're going to see now is that the skills are going to be elevated because that individual doesn't just feel safe, but he or she feels comfortable enough to know I can fail, I can fall, I can trip up, I can make a mistake, but I have somebody with me in the process.
Mm-hmm.
What a lot of people are missing is what I call that snuggle push theory, where not enough people are snuggling people at the onset to feel comfortable to push them.
Gotcha.
What we're doing is pushing immediately to get a result, right? And that's leading to discouragement, bitterness, anger, depression, resentment, a number of different negative aspects. So in conclusion, what I really want the audience to understand is this really from leadership perspective. You're what I call a CHO, a Chief Heart Officer. You're an individual that understands the value of people, in essence, the value of the business. So you're both managing those things hand in hand. So you're not leaving one without the other. While at the same time, you're realizing that the people don't work for you, you work for your people. And it's important to spend that time to build that rapport and to be that top-down process of you being that example of self-awareness and leadership within your company. And it's really simple, I find, but we make it very complicated. And how I want to end it is by saying this: there are people who will do things that they wish to do, which is trying to be fancy because it sounds good. There are people who are going to talk about doing something, which is fronting or faking it. But then there are those who will really do something, which will back up their mouth and back up the actions to use to help elevate and support people. I think what we're missing in our Indigenous world and our Afro-Canadian communities is the backing up. A lot of things sound good. A lot of things are good. We want to make this work, but it's very few who are doing it. But we need more people helping and supporting and guiding through the process. So it's just something where, with self-awareness and leadership, it comes from the one individual to really understand who he or she is. That's going to facilitate that support from down to its people. And when you lead as an example, you don't have to talk about it. People will actually generally want to come to you. They're going to want to seek knowledge from you. They're going to want to inquire about, oh, that sounds very interesting what you said there. I would love to learn more about that. And I think now more than ever, it is important for us to be that example and not just talk about an example. It's time to show. It's time to let the evidence of our actions be our litmus test to who we are.
Mark, very, very, very well said. I'm floored by how much detail you truly put in there, and I think, and I'd honestly have to say, because I saw some of the comments coming through of people really, really supporting your points. I've got to honestly say, I really think that is a structure for leaders to really, really support diverse teams, because we got to think about it logically. Teams are becoming so much more diverse. People are coming from all walks of life, and one leadership style doesn't work for everyone. And so people really, really need to, get a hold of what that really, really means. And, I really appreciate your comments. What I want to do is, if it's okay, just because I know how time is going, I want to pivot to really understand, kind of a combination of something Sarana has talked about in terms of the importance of hiring, what you've said, Mark, to moving to Erica, because, the YMCA is so well known for its employment programs. And Erica, I'd love to, understand, what are some common places where bias typically exists in the recruiting and hiring process? And in your opinion, how do you think we can address those issues?
Okay, great question. As Black Canadian, Indigenous, and ethno or religious minority, we can attest to the daily realization of racism and outright discrimination and microaggression in the workplace. Imagine an ethno or Black community having the same credential, the same work experience and paper, and still is discriminated against 3 times greater to their counterpart. There's an echo. Is that coming from me?
Yeah, it's coming from you. I'm not hearing an echo on my side.
Okay. So, just because of their skin color or their name. So I wanted to address 4 things. Name on resumes. This is a big one where people's name, from just putting your name on resume and somebody seeing your name. And I've heard that where people have said, even employees have said this, where sometimes they don't even give people an opportunity to call them for an interview just for the name, the simple fact that they can't pronounce people's name on resume, which is very sad. So that's one of the things. I'm going to talk about my 4 points and talk about how we can resolve them. Then the second one is, and especially about young people, they speak to this, your postal code, your address on the resume doesn't allow you to get that opportunity. And in Etobicoke, we hear about this from the youth in North Etobicoke. They lived in North Etobicoke, and because the stigma attached to their community, they might go to a mall, and because just by their postal code, there's some biases there, and the employers might choose not to hire these individuals. And then it's about the credential. As a newcomer, you have credential that are similar. You sometimes have your credential assessed and given, um, um, equivalency in based on Canadian standard, but employers still sometimes are hesitant to look at individual, or sometimes they don't think your university or your post-secondary education measure up. And that's the fourth one is about criminal checks. And young people talk about this all the time.
Mm.
Some jobs requiring people to have criminal check. Is it really relevant? Is it really necessary? I can understand when you're working in vulnerable community, working with vulnerable individual, you may need to have a criminal check, but not all job is required to have a criminal check. You look at the banking, even to work as a cleaner in a bank, they want you to have a criminal check. Is it really necessary? So, I'm looking at that. And one of the things that we talk and encourage employer to do is it's called blind recruitment, where we encourage an employer to look at individual by not sort of putting their name on a resume. It's just having an online platform where people can actually go online, fill out their interest and their skill, and speak to the job. The same thing with the address and your with your schooling. Let's look at how we can remove these barriers where people can just go online and fill in what's required from the job. Thus reducing the gender, some specificness that's needed. And what we're asking for is not an handout. We're asking to be treated equally.
Right, right.
And it just doesn't stand in recruitment. It's also promotion. It's also retention. Serena talked a bit about that. It's when there's struggle, when you need to lay somebody off, who's the first to go? It's equal work for equal pay. So it's all of that. And for me, it's around educating. And that's one of the things that we do as I don't do the frontline work, but I encourage my job developer and my employment counselors to meet with employers and to talk about that and to remove that. Even microaggression in the workplace. Someone will come in to see me and I will say the general manager and not include myself, or if I need to speak to someone, they would look at me and said, but I need to speak to the manager, even when I say I'm the general manager.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I just wanted to speak about that, and again, it's about creating systems. It's not always a level playing field, but what can we do to encourage, the Black community to be hired, or Indigenous community, or even religious minorities. So I'm going to leave it at that. For me, I like to field more questions, and then we can get into some question and answers later.
Yeah, sure. And that was fantastic. Thank you for that. I'd love to ask a question to the whole panel that's based off of that, but I know there's also job seekers that are here on the call, and it'd be great just to kind of maybe, find out on the other side, you kind of gave insight, Erica, about what companies can do to ensure that they're creating equitable practices. But what could candidates do, or prospective candidates do, to make sure that they're putting their best foot forward to try to get hired in a role? I don't know if you have any comments on that, Erica or Surana or Mark or Deborah, but I would love to garner your understanding. Maybe someone wants to maybe take a moment and discuss that.
I mean, just to unpack that a little bit, I think one of the unique challenges in our world and in our space that we're in currently is with COVID-19. It's been something that I feel is not just to be self-isolated because we're trying to protect ourselves, but I believe it's also self-isolation to work on ourselves. I think one of the biggest things that has been a hurdle for most people prior to COVID-19 is their inability to be resilient in the face of adversity. I think we've lacked that in our teaching and in our approach to life, because most people have relied on language to be manipulated to make them feel that they're a victim of a circumstance. In order to really go through life right now, you have to be willing to get down and dirty and grind it out. That means that you can only control the space you occupy. You can't control what's higher than that. You got to look at what you can control. What I can control is how I organize my resume. What
Right.
type of jobs am I applying for?
Right.
What resources can I go to just to make sure that I'm on the right path? And then keep taking action on that path. I think what we're finding is people are trying to take action in different paths, and they're not going narrow and deep, but they're going wide and shallow. And that's where a lot of our hiccups come from, because wide and shallow exposes things. When you go narrow and deep, you know exactly what you're going for and why you're going for it, and you're going specifically for that. You're focusing on that direction. And while you're focusing, it's also important to be flexible in your approach so that you can be agile and pivot where you need to pivot. So let's say an individual, he or she's gone to school to become to get a master's in social work, but they're missing the experience to build on, to pursue a career with that. How many people would legitimately want to start in a group home setting to get their foot in the door of a system to learn the job and do what they need to do in that part of it to work towards the end of pursuing private practice as the end result, right? The whole idea here is that we've created a system where people wanted to jump from A to Z without going through A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. Because the perception is that, you know, to a certain extent, we focus on the outcome of people's successes, but not the journey. Mm-hmm. And the journey is what makes things practical. The journey is what puts things in perspective. When you're able to see someone in your own line go through perseverance, resiliency, and have optimism and faith to actually get to where they got to get to, that's more beneficial than watching a celebrity on social media talk about their success or the house they have. A lot of our relatable aspects of success comes from what we see in social media versus what's real life, right? And we have to start to revisit that, meaning we got to start revisiting the realities of our situations while we're working towards our purpose, while we're working towards that goal, right? I'm never going to tell someone they can't achieve something, but I also want people to realize that there's certain things within the system we don't have control over, but you got to be able to fight more than you're seeking success.
Fantastic.
Because once you get to that point of accomplishment and you look back at the journey, that's going to be your legacy that people will remember you by. So when you go to your grave, you don't go to your grave forgotten. You're actually remembered because of the path you took and the impact that you made.
Awesome. Just before we move forward into kind of, you know, our final question, Sarana, are you able to hear me, Sarana? Just so I know. Okay. I think she might be frozen. So Mina, maybe you might need to send Sarana a message.
So we haven't had Deborah yet.
No, I know. Just as we come up in terms of questions from the audience, but you know, Mark, really, you know, I love how you talked about the journey there, and I want to ask Deborah a question. Just before I do that, I want to say to everyone who's online, again, thank you so much for being online. We're going to be moving shortly into questions from the audience. And so if you have any questions, Mina is fielding them, so you can send them through LinkedIn or Facebook Live or however we have that set up. But if you have any questions, we'd love for you to participate in asking you those questions. But the journey is so important, and I feel like Deborah has such a great background to really, really talk about the journey in the lives of children through adolescence and so forth. And Deborah, I'd love to ask you, I mean, you know, you're doing such a great work with Diversity Kids. You know, our next generation of BIPOC children, you know, in my opinion, really must be recognized. And so I'd love to understand from you what strategies we can employ to ensure that we're raising a generation of leaders, raising a generation that moves through that journey that Mark talked about for our communities and organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just love what you said, that we really do need to recognize our BIPOC children as a group. So the first thing that I have to say is we really need to foster a critical mind. So we have to have youth audit their own sources of their input, whether that's their television shows that they're watching, or their online content that they consume, or the books that they read. We all know that these inputs shape what we think is normal in our world, and we need to find out what draws them to these content. And it's not for us to tell them not to watch it or not to consume it, but ask why. You know, what are they getting from it? What do they see? Fostering a critical mind really allows them to ask those questions for themselves, because that's what we want them to do. It also means that we have to allow, and this is the tough part, we have to allow them to be critical of our own views. So I'm constantly learning and welcome young people to challenge my views of what I think is normal, or what I've, seen growing up, and what I, have as a value. The reason why is because if I think about what I had as a youth, or as I had as growing up, we had BIPOC shows, of course, but they were on specialty networks, and the inclusion, the integration just wasn't there. So the second thing is that a critical mind isn't fostered in our school system. It's not really until the post-secondary level that we're really allowed to question and be critical of what we learn. And to me, I think that's already too late, but at least it's a start. But we have to recognize that there's some that aren't able to get that university education, or choose that the university education is not for them, for them. So we do have to allow them to be critical. Another thing, and Sarana really made this point, it's the mentorship and the sponsorship. So yes, of course, 100% career sponsorships are critical. And I encourage, along with Sarana, to all leaders to make time and make space to form those. But for everyone else, don't undervalue the impact that informal relationships have on the youth. So that means just listening to them and making space to hear what they have to say. So it's clearing the floor. It's taking the time to validate their experiences, their thoughts, their beliefs, their ideas. So in those mentorships, or in those conversations, that relationship, let the youth know that it's okay to ask for help. So as Canadians, we value independence. We value having pride in what we do, and, standing on your own 2 feet, pulling yourself up from your bootstraps, so to speak. But there's additional pressure on the BIPOC community and immigrant communities to do the same. So now, while the values are not inherently bad, what happens is that they become alienating when we start to face obstacles, right? So when a person is so attached to those values, it can be really hard to ask for the help, to ask for the mentorship, because you feel like you have to face these things all alone. Now, the last thing I want to say is that we really need to start encouraging everyone, so not just the BIPOC communities, but everyone, to start demanding diversity in all of our spaces, whether that's in our products, on television, in our workplaces. So we know social change is a multifaceted approach. And we value inclusion, but companies, they rely on that data. They rely on knowing why and how diversity is really going to impact their bottom line. So I know it's ridiculous, but we really do need to think about it as like a chicken and egg scenario, where the products are out there, the services are out there, the content is out there, but we just need to create more of a demand for it so we can see much, much more of it.
Wow. Listen, that was definitely very insightful. There's something that I really want to if I could just ask you a question, Deborah, because diversity kids, it's really trying to shape the learning experience and the education experience for children. And you said something that so resonated with me. I really respect and I appreciate elementary and high school teachers, but I remember going to university and I remember taking my first few classes and saying, I don't know what I learned in high school. I just remember that because I remember I was able to, as you said, challenge different thoughts and stuff like that. So here's my question. What can, whether it's adults or parents, do to really help challenge kids from an educational level outside of, the elementary and high school areas? What can we do to really get, those thoughts flowing? And I know you mentioned a couple, but maybe you can kind of dive in a little bit more specific.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what it is just opening up their world to diversity. So whether that's in the books that they're reading or their toys that they're playing with, and ask them where they're coming from. So kids we know as young as 3, 4 have these ideas of what their world is about, but then we silence them sometimes. So if they're asking questions that are a little bit challenging, or sometimes we don't know the answer to, we silence them really, really quickly. So it really is in the time and sitting with them and learning where they're coming from and what they have to say, and follow them down that path, right? So whether it's asking, why do they think a person is a certain way, or why do they prefer playing with a certain toy, or why do they like that book, or why are they watching, sometimes I think ridiculous content on YouTube or TikTok. Why? What is it that attracts them to it? And what are they getting from it? And we have to be willing to sit and listen and understand that their perspective is valid, but different than ours.
Awesome.
I wanted to jump in. One of the things that I did with my boys through school, and I will encourage family to do this as well. They're a little bit older now, but throughout their elementary school, whenever they had to do a paper discussion, I didn't just leave it to Black History. We would go to the library and look at, say it's an inventor that they would have to speak to. They would have to go to the library and find a Black inventor and to do their research. And I find that was very helpful to give them, learning that's related to them. But as they go older, then they started to look at, what are their interests. But by giving that platform, they definitely were able to grow and to develop and also learn their history that way, when it wasn't taught in the school system, especially in the elementary systems.
Erica, thank you so much for jumping on that. Really appreciate it. Listen, we're coming closer to the final steps of this conversation. All of you have given such amazing insight on the questions that were asked. I want to go to an audience question. Sheila brought up a question that I really want to pose to the panel. And the question is what are 5 pieces of advice? Maybe we only have time for 3, but what's some advice that we could give to a leader who is a person of color, what they can do when managing microaggressions at work, and to give a little bit of context to the circumstance. Sheila asked, when there's nobody else who's around to witness that those microaggressions even happened, or even in a context when others observe it happening at the moment but may not even do anything. What are some advices that we could give a leader who is a person of color to do when managing microaggressions at work? Anyone want to start?
I can jump in. Can you hear me, Dean?
Yes, definitely can hear you loud and clear, Serena.
Finally, technology working again. Thank you. I think with microaggressions, historically we've been said, hey, just take it easy, let it go, right? That was what been the default sort of way that we've been taught to go about handling them. But I think it's very important that someone act in a way that made them feel comfortable. I mean, there's no generic prescription, right? I can't really push someone to respond if they're not comfortable. But if you feel comfortable, you respond immediately in the most professional way and alert the person to that it is a microaggression, why it is a microaggression, and specifically what it means, what it feels, how you feel with that. Now, the person may not be receptive, they may be pushed back, they may be angry, defensive about it, but I think, if you respond immediately, you can just remove it from you owning that issue and stewing over it for a long time. You could also consider what channels may exist in the organization with or without a witness or without a witness to say, hey, this occurred, this is a situation that occurred, document what happened, share it with HR, share it with operations management, so that there is, for your own sake, documentation and paper trail for that. But I think it's important that it is addressed. How far you go with it is determined on your comfort level. the impact it's having on you, how you feel about it, how it may impact the way you work, how you may engage, and how you may want to be viewed as you go forward in the organization. Some organization may not have a space, a process, or structure for you to bring forward the issue, because there are sometimes consequences negative to speaking up that you may want to figure out how you would navigate appropriately. So understanding how your organization will handle that situation so that you're ready to navigate the pushback, the lack of support that may happen depending on your organization. So it really is dependent on the person, whether you want to communicate, engage, educate, or whether you simply want to go through the bringing to attention to it via the channels in the organization.
Thanks, Sarana. Anyone else want to make a comment on that? All right, great. Hopefully, Sheila, Sarana has been able to help answer. Another question came in, and it's specifically directed to Mark. And the question is, as a job seeker, how should you manage anxiety when you're, continually, being rejected? And the speaker, the audience member, mentioned they really like your concept of self-awareness, but, how do you find that core, your core strength? Mark, you want to help address?
Yeah, I actually coached a young lady on something similar to this, where we were speaking on that, and I know that we all cope differently and deal with rejection in different ways. So it's not like a one-stop shop for everybody to do it the same way, respectfully. The truth of the matter is that when you look at something like rejection and not, reaching that goal, I go to what I call being a glass half full person. So that means for me is, for one, like my mom would always say, it's not meant for you to do that one. Like she would say it in a way, in a Jamaican way of saying, God has better plans for you. So she would use my spiritual component to help, right? So that always stuck with me in my head. So I've never forgotten that. Number two, when rejection comes across your table around something that you've wanted and it is really driving you, is that you have to understand, when going through that process of rejection, you always want to unpack what were the positive aspects of the actual process for you, because the rejection is already heavy with negativity if you're already thinking that way. So what you want to do is you want to look at one or two tidbits that are something you can hold on to that gives you a light of hope. And then number three, you want to get back in the game after you process it. Once you process how it made you feel, what you learned from it, what were some of the things that you could do better the next time, then tomorrow I would say dust yourself off and pick yourself back up, because you will not get the job through osmosis. Rejection is a part of life. Failure is a part of life. Getting knocked down is a part of life. The only thing that changes is the choice we make to either get back up and smile about it, or get back up and be a victim about it. It's all a mindset game. You have to process it in your mind. It's not easy to go through rejection, which I respect and understand, but we have to come to grips with accepting it. It's just a part of our human evolution, which is where I said earlier in my talk that to a certain extent, the system has failed us in preparing people how to cope with the realities of life: failure, rejection, disappointment. And we've turned those things into explicitly expressing anger, frustration, drug and alcohol use, et cetera, to replace that. And then it becomes that we have an insecurity, and then we start expressing our insecurity through pain. What I'm trying to do is elevate that with self-awareness to say, glass half full, what were the benefits? How did it make me feel? What did I learn from it? Tomorrow, I'll start back up and start applying for new jobs. I'm going to give myself the permission to process it today. I'm going to give myself permission to, I don't know, go shop or go to the spa, or now because of COVID, I might just go for a walk or go, do something that is healthy mentally for you to go through that process of rejection, and then get yourself back up and say, we got to get back to it, because I'm still where I am today, the next day. Right. So you have to figure that type of switch in your mind when you're able to make that jump. It's not something that I'm going to quote unquote tell you. I'm going to inspire you on how to do it, but I'm not going to put you in a position where I'm going to dictate to you. I want you to start to see a self-audit of your strengths, your challenges, what you learned from it, and then rebuild. and start back up. And then eventually when you start rebuilding, you're going to get to that, you're going to make that beautiful condo, and it will be that achievement that you've focused on and made happen for yourself.
Mark, thank you so much. Anyone have anything else they want to add?
I think that was well said. The one piece that I use to people when they're feeling this way, I always said the quicker you get to your no's is the quicker it is to get to your yes. So again, it's just to look at what you learned from the that interview. And as Mark says, get ready to re-energize yourself and to go back at it.
Awesome. Listen, we're coming up to our hour and of being on this chat. Listen, I just think this was a wonderful conversation about hearing voices from the Black community. I really can't say more than enough how much the contribution has helped me personally in my learning, and so I'm sure it's helped many others who have been listening online or who this will be shared to. So I want to take the moment to say thank you to Deborah, to Mark, to Erica, to Sarana for all of your insights, everything that you've brought to the table. Honestly, it's just a wealth of experience, and is anyone not okay with people connecting with them on LinkedIn? All right.
No,
yeah. All right. Cool. So feel free if you're, if they don't accept it, they just don't accept you. But if you want to connect with any of them, please do, or myself. Mina, I'm going to hand over the floor back to you so you can kind of wrap this all up.
Thank you so much, Dean. Thank you to every single one of you. This was such an enlightening conversation that, I just had to sit quiet and absorb everything. So similar to what Dean said, this conversation has really helped me and understand and also learn. Many persons of color and many others that I know are really afraid to have these conversations. And the fact that you're openly having these conversations, you're taking the time to educate everybody and saying, this is how we feel and this is what we are. And, this is how we need to move forward is amazing. So I want to thank each and every one of you, and Dean, especially to you for being such a fantastic moderator. Absolutely fantastic. I think we have to do this again in a few more weeks. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
100%.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Awesome. And we'll be connected. We'll have you guys back again. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mina. Bye.
Thanks, Erica. Bye. Action, networking, taking it above, bringing value to the conversations that you're having.
As we climb in our journey and we learn, to share that learning with others so that we grow as a community.
Inclusion plays a part in terms of now garnering all those experiences together and creating a cohesive enough team to produce strong performance.
Be visible. Comment about it. Reach out.